Page 96 continued. Unnatural themes. The Jacobean dramatists were interested in dramatizing unnatural themes. Illicit and incestuous love captured their imagination, and such subjects as the life of prostitutes and whores began to have an appeal to them, as can be seen from the titles of the plays produced during this period. The White Devil, The Honest Whore were the popular plays of the time. In the field of tragedy, dramatists were attracted by the stories of murder, horror, and blood. The Jacobean dramatists had a morbid taste of murder and madness. Webster and Tournier revelled in bloodshed and horror in their tragedies. Marston, Ford, Shirley were deliberate dramatic sensation mongers. Lack of real genius. It was inevitable that the drama should decline after Shakespeare, for the simple reason that there was no other great enough to fill his place. Just as Chaucer's successors failed to maintain the greatness of Chaucer, Shakespeare's successors had little of the genius of Shakespeare. In the hands of his successors, comedy became eccentric and tragedy lost its epic grandeur. Ben Jonson failed in the field of tragedy. There was far more scholarship in Sejanus and Catiline than Julius Caesar or Coriolanus, but far less art. End of page 96, now page 97. Poetry was clogged by erudition, and though there was as much of Roman gravitas, there was little humanities. In the hands of Marston, Tournier, Ford, Shirley, tragedy became blood-curdling and horrible. Pathos or sentimentality. A feature of the decline can be correlated to the towering of the moral tone in the appearance of pathos in tragedy and of sentimentality in comedy, for these qualities are born of a weakening of the moral force. The pathos of the Shakespearean plays now takes the shape of sentimentality in the plays of the Jacobean dramatists. Webster is the only Jacobean dramatist who can create true pathos of the Shakespearean type. The death of the Duchess in The Duchess of Malfi is really pathetic. In Tournier's tragedies and in the tragedies of Marston, we fail to have the true pathos that may have an appeal to our sentiments and move us to genuine pity for the lot of suffering characters. Exhaustion of creative spirit. Shakespeare, in spite of borrowing his material from different sources, had the creative imagination, and in his hands the borrowed material suffered a sea change into something rich and strange. After Shakespeare, this creative spirit in drama began to decline, and all that the dramatists could do was to attempt satirical comedies with good deal of criticism about the prevailing tendencies of the times. Critical and creative genius may sometimes appear together, but it is more usual for critical spirit to appear when the creative spirit has begun to be exhausted. After Shakespeare, this creative spirit in drama began to decline, and all that the dramatists could do was to attempt satirical comedies with a good deal of criticism about the prevailing tendencies of the time. Critical and creative genius may sometimes appear together, but it is more usual for a critical spirit to appear when the creative spirit has begun to be exhausted, and the highest creative genius is is as a rule not critical. Ben Jonson's comedies are critical and exhibit a woeful lack of creative spirit. This want of creative spirit is further evinced in the satirical comedies of Marston, who also uses the drama as a vehicle of satire. Comedy after 1600, in fact, is rarely poetic in spirit. Gradually, the exhaustion of the creative impulse becomes very evident. The university wits had been largely inspired by the Latin dramatists, but they were workers in a new field. The Jacobean and Caroline dramatists, however, were inevitably oppressed by the achievements of their predecessors, which had been considerable both in bulk and in quality. It became difficult for them to find fresh plots, even new variations of well-worn themes, or of fresh characters. Downfall in dramatic technique. Though the Jacobean dramatists showed an advance in construction and sometimes in dialogue, yet they could not keep up the mighty line of Marlowe, and their blank verse became weak and vapid. Vapid. The blank verse of Beaumont and Fletcher is similarly inclined to a free use of weak and feminine endings. In fact, the mighty line of Marlowe and terse verse of Shakespeare in the prime are lost. As the 15th century followers of Chaucer failed to retain the charm of their master's versification, so the later dramatists were quite unable to recapture the vital quality of dramatic blank verse, though they never lost the art of the lyric. Characterization. The Jacobean dramatists had little skill in creating characters of force and fire. They could not create new characters. They had certain stock characters which they represented again and again in their plays. The whore, the lustful king, the adventurous panderer were their wooden characters, and they repeated them with mechanical regularity in their plays. Other channels of expression. Dramatic literature also suffered a setback due to the growing popularity of poetry and novel as a medium of expressing literary thoughts. These two forms of literature proved more fascinating to authors, and instead of diverting their energy to drama, which was on its way to the decline, they directed their thoughts and ideas to the field of poetry and fiction. Opposition by the Puritans. The Puritan opposition to drama is also responsible for the decline of drama during this age. Ever since the drama became popular in England, the Puritans waged a war against it. They regarded the drama and all other forms of entertainment as the devil's work, to be avoided by all men who sought salvation. As early as 1579, Stephen Gosson, Gosson, Ever since the drama became popular in England, the Puritans waged war against it. They regarded the drama and all other forms of entertainment as the devil's work, to be avoided by all men who sought salvation. As early as 1579, Thomas Gosson directed his school of abuse against all secular literature, making no distinction between poets, pipers, players, jesters, and such like such like caterpillars of Commonwealth. In 1583, Philip Stubbs, Stubbs, claimed biblical support for the condemnation of drama. In 1632, Prynne, Prynne attacked the stage, and in 1642, only 26 years after Shakespeare's death, both the Houses of Parliament voted to close the theatres as breeders of lies and immorality. Thus, after the death of Shakespeare, the drama began to show signs of decline in moral plot construction, characterization, and technique. The spirit of drama had left the body in 1816. The corpse was presumed. The corpse remained to be buried, and the ceremony was performed in 1642. Dominant tendencies in the Jacobean and Caroline drama. The comedies, historical plays, and tragedies of Shakespeare marked the acme of dramatic art in the Elizabethan age. During the first decade of the 17th century, the general decline in drama began more and more manifest. In fact, the seeds of decadence became evident in the play of Shakespeare, Tempest, The Winter's Tale, Cymbeline, and Pericles. When under the influence of Beaumont and Fletcher, he repeated the same characters in new forms and produced artificial and stereotyped situations. But Shakespeare was a genius, and what appeared as flaws in him were not generally noticed, for by the force of his poetry and universal observation, he would have managed to hide the shortcoming of his art. But then his imitators and followers attempted to tread in their footsteps. They woefully failed, for they neither had the genius nor the dramatic skill of the great artist. In fact, drama during this period reached the nadir of its fame, and when we come to Ford and Shirley, we find drama gasping for breath for its survival. The Elizabethan drama in the hands of the university wits and Shakespeare's wits and Shakespeare were essentially like the Greek drama, a democratic institution, and the stage voiced the sentiments of the people. In general, we may say that the early Elizabethan drama was a national affair, but with the accession to the throne of James I to the throne, the democratic note gradually wanted, and the sober-minded people ceased to stand the theatre. It became the possession of the aristocratic coterie, and the cavaliers and the courtiers only revelled in it. So the playwrights began to look for patronage not from the public, but from the court and the king.